Hey guys, welcome to this JavaScript Canvas tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be creating a bouncing ball, as we can see visualized in this example right here. I think it's a fairly beginner and intermediate friendly kind of project because it teaches you a lot about working with the canvas, clearing it, populating it dynamically, and using stuff like requestAnimationFrame, working with classes, objects, and so on. So without further ado, let's dive into it. In this app, we are going to need only two files. So one of them is index.html. Let's create it. Here we type HTML, use the boilerplate built into VS Code, and we link to our script. We need to create this file, app.js. Now let's create it. With this, we are done with HTML, and now we can focus on JavaScript. So this is app.js. And here we are going to need two classes. The first one is the ball. So let's create it. Ball, and its constructor takes only 6 parameters. One of them is x, y, x velocity, y velocity, radius, and color. This is the class of our ball naturally. And here we just go this.x equals x. And we do the very same for all the other parameters. And we create the second class, which is our game. Its constructor stays empty, and it only needs 3 things. So this.canvas equals null, this.ctx equals null, and this.ballArray equals empty array. So now we are going to need the first 3 functions, so let's create them. One of them is going to be init, to just initialize whatever we want to initialize within the class that is called game. Then we need canvas setup to set up our canvas. And in canvas setup, we'll go this canvas equals document.create new element, make it a canvas. Then we set the width and the height. So the width is going to be 500 and the height is going to be 500 as well. Then we need the context. This.ctx equals this.canvas.getsContext 2D. And next we just need to append the canvas to the document. So document.body.append child, this canvas, wonderful. And with this we are done with this function. And next we also need to draw our canvas. So let's create a function for this. Draw canvas equals a function. And then this.ctx.fillStyle equals black. And then this.ctx.fillRect, how much do we want to fill with black? So we start at x coordinate 0, y coordinate 0, and we choose the entirety of our width and the entirety of our height because we want everything to be in black within this canvas. Next, we want to have an outline for it, so we just go this.ctx.strokeStyleBlue, and this is essentially just going to give it a blue border. So let's set the line width to 5, and to apply the stroke, we need this.ctx.strokeRect. We go again at 0, 0, and this canvas width, this canvas height. So now that we have these 2 functions, we can also call them within init. So let's do that. This.canvas setup and this.draw canvas. And let us initiate our class as well. So const game equals new game and game.init. Now let's test it to see if we have a black canvas on our index.html. We do. It is working good so far. Before we continue to the game logic and drawing and stuff like that, we are going to need a few randomization functions. So let's define them. One of them is going to be getVelocity. And here we are going to set a random number, met.random multiplied by 4 minus 2, then random number equals random met.round random number. I essentially just need a number that is either a +2 or a -2. then random number equals random number. If it is greater or equal to 0, we return 2. Otherwise, we return a negative 2. And then we return the random number. This is a ternary operator, so it checks is this value greater than 0. If it is true, it returns 2. Otherwise, it returns a negative 2. Next, I'm going to need a random number, but within a range. So let's define a function for that. Rand max, min and max. And here we just return met floor, met random, multiplied by max minus min plus min. And the very last thing that we are going to need is a random color, a random RGB color. So get random color RGB. And now const r equals met.floor met random multiplied by 256. And we are going to need this for each and every letter. So R, G, and B. And the very last thing that we are going to do with this function is return a template literal. So it's going to be RGB, parentheses, each of the random generated values from our letters separated by commas. And with this, our randomization needs are covered. We can proceed to the other things. Now that we have our randomization functions in place, let's generate our ball. So for this, we'll create a class and we'll call it createBalls, and we pass to it one argument, which is number of balls. And within this function, we are going to open a for loop. Let I equal 0, I less than number of balls, I plus plus. Just doing this, we are making this function dynamic, and we are essentially allowing the user to predefine the number of balls they would like to populate the canvas with. So here we let ball equal new ball. Remember, we defined this class when we started our app. So it takes several parameters: the x coordinate, the y coordinate, x velocity, y velocity, radius, and color. So here we are going to use our rent function. We're going to set the minimum to 50 and the maximum to this canvas width minus 50. This is for the x coordinate. For the y coordinate, we are going to do something similar. So this rent min 50 and max this that canvas that height minus 50. So what we are essentially doing with this logic is, imagine this is our canvas here. We don't want to go to the very edge of the canvas and draw outside of it. So what we are doing is just telling it, just take the maximum minus 50. So it will always draw the circle somewhere here instead of here outside of it. Great. Now we need to define x velocity and y velocity. For this, we have a dedicated function, so let's use it. So this.getVelocity, and then we call this function once more, this.getVelocity. Great. Now we got to radius, so let's set radius. We use our random function again, this.rand, and let's set the radius to be a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 50. And the last thing we are going to need is a color. For this, once more, we created a function, so this.getRandomColor RGB. And the very last thing that we want to do within this iteration, you remember we created this array, we call it this.ballArray. So we push to it the ball that we created. So let's do just that, this.ballArray push ball. Now that we can create our ball, let's draw it to the canvas. So we'll define a function, call it drawBall, pass to it only one argument, which is a ball. And then here within this function, we are going to do a few CTX things. So we are going to this.ctx begin pet to tell it we are beginning to draw. Then this.ctx.arc, and we're going to give it the ball's x coordinates, the ball's y coordinates, the ball's radius. Our start angle is going to be 0. And because we want to have a full circle, we'll just go 2 multiplied by met.pi for our end angle. And then for the color, we are going to select the color of our ball. And last thing we are going to do is simply fill it. Great. Next thing we are going to need is another draw function. So let's define it. And in this draw function, we are going to clear rect every time we run it. This is going to be in a loop, you'll see later on. And this is absolutely necessary to do every time you're doing video game, animations, visualizations, anything that's going to move or change. Because otherwise you're going to have trails or the app is not going to work as it intended. Everything will clutter and pile up and it will not be what you want it to be. So within the draw, we can also call our draw canvas function. And then we can use our ball array to visualize every ball in it. So this ball array for each ball. Draw this draw ball, great. And now to test this function, let's add it to our init. So right here we don't need this because we can just call draw like this and we'll draw the canvas and the ball. And we also need to generate a ball or two. So let's just create some ball. Create balls and make it one ball for this time. Okay, and now let's run it and test and see if it works. Okay, so this is our canvas, and as you can see, every time I refresh it, I get a differently sized ball at a different location on the canvas. So it is working so far. So right now we are displaying a ball, and if I refresh the page, I'll get a different ball with a different size at a different location. And if I go to my app and I want to increase the number of balls that we are displaying to, let's say, 5, I will get 5 balls of different colors at different locations. But at this point, our application is not animating, it's not updating, and the balls are not colliding with the edges and then bouncing. So we need to implement this. So the last two functions that we need to implement and add are update and game loop, and this is to animate the balls. So update is going to include the collision detection logic. So let's start with that. So here we go, this ball array, and for each ball, and we start updating the coordinates. So ball x equals is incremented by ball x velocity, and ball y coordinate is incremented by ball y velocity. And now we start checking if we are colliding with the edges. So if ball x plus ball radius is greater than this canvas width, or ball x minus ball radius is lesser than 0, then we want to take ball x velocity and multiply it by -1 as to invert it. This makes perfect sense mathematically if you think about it, because if you take a negative number and you multiply it with a negative number, you get a positive number. And if you take a positive number and you multiply it with a negative number, you're getting a negative number. So what we are saying, if you are moving here, x, let's say x2, and you're moving here, and you got to this edge, just invert the direction you are moving in and move here. Then if you get here to 0, or you're about to exceed 0, again, invert your direction. And we are going to need to do the very same with y. So let's just copy paste and update this. And just change width to height here and change ball to y velocity, ball.y velocity. And this is it. This is the entirety of our collision logic. Next thing we need to do is just add some things to our game loop. So we are going to add to it the update function, the draw function, and we are going to request animation frame and call our game loop. Request animation frame is basically a recursive callback function. It's a method that tells the browser you want to use an animation, and then it goes again and again and again to the function that you put in it. So right here, it's just like an endless loop. You can think about it as an endless while loop. And now let's go and update our init. So right here, we don't need the draw anymore. We can just put this.game loop. And now let's give it a test and see if it is working. Yes, as you can see, the balls are moving, and every time they collide with an edge, they are going to the exact opposite direction. We can also add more balls, just for fun. Perfect. Let's refresh it, get more colors, more sizes. And this is how to build a bouncing ball in JavaScript. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.